took a second chance, trusted you again. I feel shattered. Broke up just cause you play me like a violin. Shame on me for all you said I've deadly sins. Had it all but you craved attention. Drowned in your own reflection. Put me down just to see me get back up again. 6 feet under and you're ready to give all pain. If I was your new addition, you'd make me part of your equation. Shattered from the past, wish you were my last. Needed pieces like broken glass. Frozen looking at pictures that we took back in the summer. I thought that I would remember how I used to feel, but this isn't real. Now we're over. Take it all, there's nothing left here anyway. We used to talk, but now I don't know what to say. Now we're just two passive strangers who tried to lie goodbye forever. Put me down just to see me get back up again. 6 feet under and you're ready to give all the pain. If I was your new addition, you'd make me part of your equation. Shattered from the past, wish you were my last. Needed pieces like broken glass.
And hello there. I hope that everyone can hear and that everything is coming through okay. I know it has been a very, 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 very long time since I streamed. Just a lot of stuff in real life going on. So I'm determined that I will get through this book. Maybe not all tonight, but I will get through it. So, let us begin with our reading. And we are on chapter 7 of book 4, I think. I'll put it in the stream title. Journey to the Crossroads. Frodo and Sam returned to their beds and lay there in silence, resting for a little while. Men bestirred themselves, and the business of the day began. After a while, water was brought to them, and then they were led to a table where food was set for 3. Faramir broke his fast with them. He had not slept since the battle on the day before, yet he did not look weary. When they had finished, they stood up. "May no hunger trouble you on the road," said Faramir. "You have little provision, but some small store of food fit for travelers I have ordered to be stowed in your packs. You will have no lack of water as you walk in Ithilien, but do not drink of any stream that flows from Imlad Morgul, the Valley of Living Death. This also I must tell you. My scouts and watchers have all returned, even some that have crept within sight of the Morannon. They all find a strange thing. The land is empty. Nothing is on the road, and no sound of foot or horn or bowstring is anywhere to be heard. A waiting silence broods above the nameless land. I do not know what this portends. But the time draws swiftly to some great conclusion. Storm is coming. Hasten while you may. If you are ready, let us go. The sun will soon rise above the shadow." The hobbits' packs were brought to them, a little heavier than they had been, and also 2 stout staves of polished wood, shod with iron, and with carven heads through which ran plaited leather thongs. "I have no fitting gifts to give you at our parting," said Faramir, "but take these staves. They may be of service to those who walk or climb in the wild. The men of the White Mountains use them, though these have been cut down to your height and newly shod. They are made of the fair tree Lebethron, beloved of the Woodwrights of Gondor, and a virtue has been set upon them of finding and returning. May that virtue not wholly fail under the shadow into which you go." The hobbits bowed low. "Most gracious host," said Frodo, "it was said to me by Elrond Halfalven that I should find friendship upon the way, secret and unlooked for. Certainly I looked for no such friendship as you have shown. To have found it turns evil to great good." Now they were ready to depart. Gollum was brought out of some corner or hiding hole, and he seemed better pleased with himself than he had been, though he kept close to Frodo and avoided the glance of Faramir. "Your guide must be blindfolded," said Faramir, "but you and your servant Samwise I release from this, if you wish." Gollum squealed and squirmed and clutched at Frodo when they came to bind his eyes, and Frodo said, "Blindfold us all 3, and cover up my eyes first, and then perhaps he will see that no harm is meant." This was done, and they were led from the cave of Henneth Annwn. After they had passed the passages and stairs, they felt the cool morning air, fresh and sweet, above them. Still blind, they went on for some little time, up and then gently down. At last, the voice of Faramir ordered them to be uncovered. They stood under the boughs of the woods again. No noise of the falls could be heard, for a long southward slope lay now between them and the ravine in which the stream flowed. To the west they could see light through the trees, as if the world came there to a sudden end, at a brink looking out only onto sky. "Here is the last parting of our ways," said Faramir. "If you take my counsel, you will not turn eastward yet. Go straight on, for thus you will have the cover of the woodland for many miles. On your west is an edge where the land falls into the great vales, sometimes suddenly and sheer, sometimes in long hillsides. Keep near to this edge and the skirts of the forest. In the beginning of your journey you may walk under daylight. I think the land dreams in a false peace, and for a while all evil is withdrawn. Fare you well while you may." He embraced the hobbits then, after the manner of his people, stooping and placing his hands upon their shoulders and kissing their foreheads. "Go with the good will of all good men," he said. They bowed to the ground. Then he turned, and without looking back, he left them and went to his 2 guards that stood at a little distance away. They marveled to see with what speed these green-clad men now moved, vanishing almost in the twinkling of an eye. The forest where Faramir had stood seemed empty and drear, as if a dream had passed. Frodo sighed and turned back southward. As if to mark his disregard of all such courtesy, Gollum was scrabbling in the mound at the foot of a tree. "Hungry again already," thought Sam. "Well, now for it again." "Have they gone at last?" said Gollum. "Nasty, wicked men. Smeagol's neck still hurts him. Yes, it does. Let's go." "Yes, let us go," said Frodo. "But if you can only speak ill of those who showed you mercy, keep silent." "Nice master," said Gollum. "Smeagol was only joking. Always forgives, he does. Yes, yes, even nice master's little trickses. Oh yes, nice master. Nice Smeagol." Frodo and Sam did not answer. Hoisting their packs and taking their staves in hand, they passed on into the woods of Ithilien. Twice that day they rested and took a little of the food provided by Faramir. Dried fruits and salted meat, enough for many days, and bread enough to last while it was still fresh. Gollum ate nothing. The sun rose and passed overhead unseen and began to sink, and the light through the trees to the west grew golden. And always they walked in cool green shadow, and all about them was silence. The birds seemed all to have flown away or to have fallen dumb. Darkness came early to the silent woods, and before the fall of night they halted, weary, for they had walked 7 leagues or more from Henneth Anwine. Frodo lay and slept away the night on the deep mold beneath an ancient tree. Sam beside him was more uneasy. He woke many times, but there was never a sign of Gollum, who had slipped off as soon as the others had settled to rest. Whether he had slept by himself in some hole nearby or had wandered restlessly prowling through the night, he did not say, but he returned with the first glimmer of light and roused his companions. "Must get up, yes they must," he said. "Long ways to go still, south and east. Hobbits must make haste." That day passed much as the day before had gone, except that the silence seemed deeper. The air grew heavy, and it began to be stifling under the trees. It felt as if thunder was brewing. Golem often paused, sniffing the air, and then he would mutter to himself and urge them to greater speed. As the third stage of their day's march drew on and afternoon waned, the forest opened out, and the trees became larger and more scattered. Great ilexes of huge girth stood dark and solemn in wide glades, with here and there among them hoary ash trees and giant oaks just putting out their brown-green buds. About them lay long lawns of green grass dappled with celandine and anemones, white and blue, now folded for sleep, and there were acres populous with the leaves of woodland hyacinths. Already their sleek bell stems were thrusting through the mold. No living creature, beast or bird was to be seen, but in these open places Golem grew afraid, and they walked now with caution, flitting from one long shadow to another. Light was fading fast when they came to the forest end. There they sat under an old gnarled oak that sent its roots twisting like snakes down a steep, crumbling bank. A deep, dim valley lay before them. On its further side the woods gathered again, blue and gray under the sullen evening, and marched on southwards. To the right the mountains of Gondor glowed, remote in the west, under a fire-flecked sky. To the left lay darkness, the towering walls of Mordor, and out of that darkness the long valley came, falling steeply in an ever-widening trough towards the Anduin. At its bottom ran a hurrying stream. Frodo could hear its stony voice coming up through the silence, and beside it, on the hither side, a road went winding down like a pale ribbon, down into chill-gray mists that no gleam of sunset touched. There it seemed to Frodo that he descried far off, floating as it were on a shadowy sea, the high dim tops and broken pinnacles of old towers, forlorn and dark. He turned to Golem. "Do you know where we are?" he said. "Yes, master. Dangerous places. This is the road from the Tower of the Moon, master, down to the ruined city by the shores of the river. The ruined city, yes, a very nasty place, full of enemies. We shouldn't have taken men's advice. Hobbits have come a long way out of the path. Must go east now, away up there." He waved his skinny arm towards the darkling mountains. "And we can't use this road. Oh no, cruel people come this way, down from the tower." Frodo looked down on to the road. At any rate, nothing was moving on it now. It appeared lonely and forsaken, running down to empty ruins in the mist. But there was an evil feeling in the air, as if things might indeed be passing up and down that eyes could not see. Frodo shuddered as he looked again at the distant pinnacles now dwindling into night, and the sound of the water seemed cold and cruel. The voice of Morgul Dween, the polluted stream that flowed from the Valley of the Wraiths. "What shall we do?" he said. "We have walked long and far. Shall we look for some place in the woods behind where we can lie hidden?" "No good hiding in the dark," said Golem. "It's in day that hobbits must hide now. Yes, in day." "Oh, come," said Sam. "We must rest for a bit, even if we get up again in the middle of the night. There'll still be hours of dark then, time enough for you to take us on a long march, if you know the way." Golem reluctantly agreed to this, and he turned back towards the trees, working eastward for a long while along the straggling edges of the wood. He would not rest on the ground so near the evil road, and after some debate they all climbed up into the crotch of a large holm oak, whose thick branches springing together from the trunk made a good hiding place and a fairly comfortable refuge. Night fell, and it grew altogether dark under the canopy of the tree. Frodo and Sam drank a little water and ate some bread and dried fruit, but Golem at once curled up and went to sleep. The hobbits did not shut their eyes. It must have been a little after midnight when Golem woke up. Suddenly they were aware of his pale eyes, unlidded, gleaming at them. He listened and sniffed, which seemed, as they had noticed before, his usual method of discovering the time of night. "Are we rested? Have we had beautiful sleep?" he said. "Let's go." "We aren't and we haven't," growled Sam. "But we'll go if we must." Golem dropped at once from the branches of the tree onto all fours, and the hobbits followed more slowly. As soon as they were down, they went on again with Golem leading, eastwards up the dark, sloping land. They could see little, for the night was now so deep that they were hardly aware of the stems of trees before they stumbled against them. The ground became more broken, and walking was more difficult, but Golem seemed in no way troubled. He led them through thickets and wastes of brambles, sometimes round the lip of a deep cleft or dark pit, sometimes down into black bush-shrouded hollows and out again. But if ever they went a little downward, always the further slope was longer and steeper. They were steadily climbing. At their first halt they looked back, and they could dimly perceive the roofs of the forest they had left behind, lying like a vast, dense shadow, a darker night under the dark, blank sky. There seemed to be a great blackness looming slowly out of the east, eating up the faint, blurred stars. Later, the sinking moon escaped from the pursuing clouds, but it was ringing all about with a sickly yellow glare. At last, Golem turned to the hobbits. "Day soon," he said. "Hobbits must hurry. Not safe to stay in the open in these places. Make haste." He quickened his pace, and they followed him wearily. Soon they began to climb up onto a great hogback of land. For the most part, it was covered with a thick growth of gorse and whortleberry, and low, tough thorns, though here and there clearings opened, the scars of recent fires. The gorse bushes became more frequent as they got nearer the top. Very old and tall they were, gaunt and leggy below, but thick above, and already putting out yellow flowers that glimmered in the gloom and gave a faint, sweet scent. So tall were the spiny thickets that the hobbits could walk upright under them, passing through long dry aisles carpeted with a deep, prickly mold. On the further edge of this broad hillback, they stayed their march and crawled for hiding underneath a tangled knot of thorns. Their twisted boughs, stooping to the ground, were overridden by a clambering maze of old briars. Deep inside there was a hollow hall, raftered with dead branch and bramble, and roofed with the first leaves and shoots of spring. There they lay for a while, too tired yet to eat, and peering out through the holes in the covert they watched for the slow growth of day. But no day came, only a dead brown twilight. In the east there was a dull red glare under the lowering cloud. It was not the red of dawn. Across the tumbled lands between, the mountains of the Efeldwath frowned at them, black and shapeless below where night lay thick and did not pass away, above with jagged tops and edges outlined hard and menacing against the fiery glow. Away to their right, a great shoulder of the mountain stood out, dark and black amid the shadows, thrusting westward. "Which way do we go from here?" asked Frodo. "Is that the opening of the Morgul Valley, away over there beyond that black mass?" "Need we think about it yet?" said Sam. "Surely we're not going to move any more today, if day it is." Perhaps not," said Golem. "But we must go soon, to the crossroads." "Yes, to the crossroads. That's the way over there. Yes, master." The red glare over Mordor died away. The twilight deepened as great vapors rose in the east and crawled above them. Frodo and Sam took a little food and then lay down, but Golem was restless. He would not eat any of their food, but he drank a little water and then crawled about under the bushes, sniffing and muttering. Then suddenly he disappeared. "Off hunting, I suppose," said Sam, and yawned. It was his turn to sleep first, and he was soon deep in a dream. He thought he was back in the Bag End garden looking for something, but he had a heavy pack on his back which made him stoop. It all seemed very weedy and rank somehow, and thorns and bracken were invading the beds down to the bottom hedge. "A job of work for me, I can see, but I'm so tired," he kept on saying. Presently he remembered what he was looking for. "My pipe," he said, and with that he woke up. "Silly," he said to himself as he opened his eyes and wondered why he was lying down under the hedge. "It's in your pack all the time." Then he realized first that the pipe might be in his pack, but he had no leaf, and next that he was hundreds of miles from Bag End. He sat up. It seemed to be almost dark. Why had his master let him sleep on out of turn right on till evening? "Haven't you had no sleep, Mr. Frodo?" he said. "What's the time? Seems to be getting late." "No, it isn't," said Frodo. "But the day is getting darker instead of lighter, darker and darker. As far as I can tell, it isn't midday yet, and you've only slept for about 3 hours." "I wonder what's up," said Sam. "Is there a storm coming? If so, it's going to be the worst there ever was. We shall wish we were down a deep hole, not just stuck under a hedge." He listened. "What's that? Thunder? Or drums? Or what is it?" "I don't know," said Frodo. "It's been going on for a good while now. Sometimes the ground seems to tremble. Sometimes it seems to be the heavy air throbbing in your ears." Sam looked round. "Where's Golem?" he said. "Hasn't he come back yet?" "No," said Frodo. "There's not been a sign or sound of him." "Well, I can't abide him," said Sam. "In fact, I've never taken anything on a journey that I'd have been less sorry to lose on the way. But it would be just like him, after coming all these miles, to go and get lost now, just when we shall need him most. That is, if he's ever going to be any use, which I doubt." "You forget the marshes," said Frodo. "I hope nothing has happened to him. And I hope he's up to no tricks. And anyway, I hope he doesn't fall into other hands, as you might say, because if he does, we shall soon be in for trouble." At that moment, a rolling and rumbling noise was heard again, louder now, and deeper. The ground seemed to quiver under their feet. "I think we are in for trouble anyway," said Frodo. "I'm afraid our journey is drawing to an end." "Maybe," said Sam. "But where there's life, there's hope, as my gaffer used to say, and need of victuals, as he most always used to add. You have a bite, Mr. Frodo, and then a bit of sleep." The afternoon, as Sam supposed it must be called, wore on. Looking out from the covert, he could see only a dun, shadowless world, fading slowly into a featureless, colorless gloom. It felt stifling, but not warm. Frodo slept unquietly, turning and tossing and sometimes murmuring. Twice Sam thought he heard him speaking Gandalf's name. The time seemed to drag interminably. Suddenly Sam heard a hiss behind him, and there was Golem on all fours, peering at them with gleaming eyes. "Wake up, wake up! Wake up, sleepies!" he whispered. "Wake up! No time to lose. We must go. Yes, we must go at once. No time to lose." Sam stared at him suspiciously. He seemed frightened or excited. "Go now? What's your little game? It isn't time yet. It can't be tea time even. Leastways not in decent places where there is tea time." "Silly!" hissed Golem. We're not in decent places. Time's running short. Yes, running fast. No time to lose. We must go. Wake up, master. Wake up. He clawed at Frodo, and Frodo, startled out of sleep, sat up suddenly and seized him by the arm. Gollum tore himself loose and backed away. They mustn't be silly, he hissed. We must go. No time to lose. And nothing more could they get out of him. Where he had been and what he had thought was brewing to make him in such a hurry, he would not say. Sam was filled with deep suspicion and showed it, but Frodo gave no sign of what was passing in his mind. He sighed, hoisted his pack, and prepared to go out into the ever-gathering darkness. Very stealthily, Gollum led them down the hillside, keeping under cover wherever it was possible, and running, almost bent to the ground, across any open space. But the light was now so dim that even a keen-eyed beast of the wild could scarcely have seen the hobbits, hooded in their gray cloaks, nor heard them. Walking as warily as the little people can, without the crack of a twig or the rustle of a leaf, they passed and vanished. For about an hour they went on, silently in single file, oppressed by the gloom and by the absolute stillness of the land, broken only now and again by the faint rumbling as of thunder far away, or drumbeats in some hollow of the hills. Down from their hiding place they went, and then turning south, they steered as straight a course as Gollum could find across a long broken slope that leaned up towards the mountains. Presently, not far ahead, looming up like a black wall, they saw a belt of trees. As they drew nearer, they became aware that these were of vast size, very ancient it seemed, and still towering high, though their tops were gaunt and broken, as if tempest and lightning blast had swept across them, but had failed to kill them or to shake their fathomless roots. The crossroads, yes, whispered Gollum, the first words that had been spoken since they left their hiding place. We must go that way. Turning eastward now, he led them up the slope, and then suddenly there it was before them, the southward road, winding its way about the outer feet of the mountains until presently it plunged into the great ring of trees. This is the only way, whispered Gollum. No paths beyond the road, no paths. We must go to the crossroads, but make haste. Be silent. As furtively as scouts within the encampment of their enemies, they crept down onto the road and stole along its westward edge under the stony bank, gray as the stones themselves and soft-footed as hunting cats. At length they reached the trees and found that they stood in a great roofless ring, open in the middle to the somber sky, and the spaces between their immense boles were like the great dark arches of some ruined hall. In the very center four ways met. Behind them lay the road to the Morannon. Before them it ran out again upon its long journey south. To their right the road from old Osgiliath was climbing up and crossing, passed out eastward into darkness. The fourth way, the road they were to take. Standing there for a moment, filled with dread, Frodo became aware that a light was shining, and it was glowing on Sam's face beside him. Turning toward it, he saw, beyond an arch of boughs, the road to Osgiliath, running almost as straight as it stretched ribbon down into the west. There, far away, beyond sad Gondor, now overwhelmed in shade, the sun was sinking, finding at last the hem of the great, slow-rolling pall of cloud, and falling in an ominous fire towards the yet unsullied sea. The brief glow fell upon a huge sitting fire, still and solemn as the great stone kings of Argonath. The years had gnawed it, and violent hands had maimed it. Its head was gone, and in its place was set a mockery, a round, rough-hewn stone, rudely painted by savage hands in the likeness of a grinning face, with one large red eye in the midst of its forehead. Upon its knees and mighty chair, and all about the pedestal were idle scrawls mixed with the foul symbols that the maggot folk of Mordor used. Suddenly, caught by the level beams, Frodo saw the old king's head. It was lying rolled away by the roadside. "Look, Sam," he cried, startled into speech. "Look, the king has got a crown again." The eyes were hollow and the carven beard was broken, but about the high stern forehead there was a coronal of silver and gold. A trailing plant with flowers like small white stars had bound itself across the brows as if in reverence for the fallen king, and in the crevices of his stony hair yellow stonecrop gleamed. "They cannot conquer forever," said Frodo. And then suddenly the brief glimpse was gone. The sun dipped and vanished, and as if at the shuddering of a lamp, black night fell. Hello, Kayla. I'm glad you stopped by. Yeah, I haven't used the campfire in a while. I was debating, I was going to say, do you guys want to keep the campfire or do you want to go back to the fireplace or the rainy window? And also, I hope the sound levels are okay because it has been so long since I streamed. I know it's in July 29th was the last time I streamed, so yeah, I'm not a good streamer. You guys want to keep the campfire then? Take a drink. On to Chapter 8. The Stairs of Cirith Ungol. Gollum was tugging at Frodo's cloak and hissing with fear and impatience. "We must go," he said. "We mustn't stand here. Make haste." Reluctantly, Frodo turned his back on the west and followed as his guide led him out into the darkness of the east. They left the ring of trees and crept along the road towards the mountains. This road, too, ran straight for a while, but soon it began to bend away southwards until it came right under the great shoulder of rock that they had seen from the distance. Black and forbidding it loomed above them, darker than the dark sky behind. Crawling under its shadow, the road went on, and rounding, it sprang east again and began to climb steeply. Frodo and Sam were plodding along with heavy hearts, no longer able to care greatly about their peril. Frodo's head was bowed. His burden was dragging him down again. As soon as the great crossroads had been passed, the weight of it, almost forgotten in Ithilien, had begun to grow once more. Now, feeling the way become steep before his feet, he looked wearily up, and then he saw it, even as Gollum had said that he would, the city of the Ringwraiths. He cowered against the stony bank. A long tilted valley, a deep gulf of shadow, ran back far into the mountains. Upon the further side, some way within the valley's arms, high on a rocky seat upon the black knees of the Ethel Dwath, stood the walls and tower of Minas Morgul. All was dark about it, earth and sky, but it was lit with light. Not the imprisoned moonlight welling through the marble walls of Minas Ithil long ago, tower of the moon, fair and radiant in the hollow of the hills. Paler indeed than the moon ailing in some slow eclipse was the light of it now, wavering and blowing like a noisome exhalation of decay, a corpse light, a light that illuminated nothing. In the walls and tower windows showed like countless black holes looking inward into emptiness, but the topmost horse of the tower revolved slowly, first one way and then another. a huge ghostly head leering into the night. For a moment the three companions stood there, shrinking, staring up with unwilling eyes. Golem was the first to recover. Again he pulled at their cloaks urgently, but he spoke no word. Almost he dragged them forward. Every step was reluctant, and time seemed to slow its pace, so that between the raising of a foot and the setting of it down, minutes of loathing passed. So they came slowly to the white bridge. Here the road, gleaming faintly, passed over the stream in the midst of the valley and went on, winding deviously up towards the city's gate, a black mouth opening in the outer circle of the northward walls. Wide flats lay on either bank, the shadowy meads filled with pale white flowers. Luminous these were too, beautiful and yet horrible of shape, like the demented forms in an uneasy dream, and they gave forth a faint, sickening charnel smell. An odor of rottenness filled the air. From mead to mead the bridge sprang. Figures stood there at its head, carven with cunning in forms human and bestial, but all corrupt and loathsome. The water flowing beneath was silent, and it steamed, but the vapor that rose from it, curling and twisting about the bridge, was deadly cold. Frodo felt his senses reeling and his mind darkening. Then suddenly, as if some force were at work other than his own will, he began to hurry, tottering forward, his groping hands held out, his head lolling from side to side. Both Sam and Golem ran after him. Sam caught his master in his arms as he stumbled and almost fell, right on the threshold of the bridge. "Not that way. No, not that way," whispered Golem, but the breath between his teeth seemed to tear the heavy stillness like a whistle, and he cowered to the ground in terror. "Hold up, Mr. Frodo," muttered Sam in Frodo's ear. "Come back. Not that way. Golem says not, and for once I agree with him." Frodo passed his hand over his brow and retched his eyes away from the city on the hill. The luminous tower fascinated him, and he fought the desire that was on him to run up the gleaming road towards its gate. At last, with an effort, he turned back, and as he did so, he felt the ring resisting him, dragging at the chain about his neck, and his eyes, too, as he looked away, seemed for the moment to have been blinded. The darkness before him was impenetrable. Golem, crawling on the ground like a frightened animal, was already vanishing into the gloom. Sam, supporting and guiding his stumbling master, followed after him as quickly as he could. Not far from the near bank of the stream there was a gap in the stone wall beside the road. Through this they passed, and Sam saw that they were on a narrow path that gleamed faintly at first, as the main road did, until climbing above the means of deadly flowers it faded and went dark, winding its crooked way up into the northern sides of the valley. Along this path the hobbits trudged, side by side, unable to see Golem in front of them, except when he turned back to beckon them on. Then his eyes shone with a green-white light, reflecting the noisome Morgul sheen, perhaps, or kindled by some answering mood within. Of that deadly gleam and of the dark eye-holes Frodo and Sam were always conscious, ever glancing fearfully over their shoulders and ever dragging their eyes back to find the darkening path. Slowly they labored on. As they rose above the stench and vapors of the poisonous stream, their breath became easier and their heads clearer. But now their limbs were deadly tired, as if they had walked all night under a burden, or had been swimming long against a heavy tide of water. At last they could go on no further without a halt. Frodo stopped and sat down on a stone. They had now climbed up to the top of the great hump of bare rock. Ahead of them there was a bay in the valley side, and round the head of this the path went on, no more than a wide ledge with a chasm on the right. Across the sheer southward face of the mountain it crawled upwards until it disappeared into the blackness above. "I must rest a while, Sam," whispered Frodo. "It's heavy on me, Sam, lad, very heavy. I wonder how far I can carry it. Anyway, I must rest before we venture on to that." He pointed to the narrow way ahead. "Shh, shh," hissed Gollum, hurrying back to them. "Shh." His fingers were on his lips, and he shook his head urgently. Tugging at Frodo's sleeve, he pointed toward the path, but Frodo would not move. "Not yet," he said. "Not yet." Weariness and more than weariness oppressed him. It seemed as if a heavy spell was laid on his mind and body. "I must rest," he muttered. At this, Gollum's fear and agitation became so great that he spoke again, hissing behind his hand, as if to keep the sound from unseen listeners in the air. "Not here, no, rest here. Fools, eyes can see us. When they come to the bridge, they will see us. Come away, climb, come." "Come, Mr. Frodo," said Sam. "He's right again. We can't stay here." "All right," said Frodo in a remote voice, as of one speaking half asleep. "I will try." Wearily he got to his feet. But it was too late. At that moment the rock quivered and trembled beneath them. The great rumbling noise, louder than ever before, rolled in the ground and echoed in the mountains. Then with searing suddenness there came a great red flash. Far beyond the eastern mountains it leapt into the sky and splashed the lowering clouds with crimson. In that valley of shadow and cold, deathly lit, it seemed unbearably violent and fierce. Peaks of stone and ridges like notched knives sprang out in staring black against the uprushing flame in Gorgoroth. Then came a great crack of thunder. And Minas Morgul answered. There was a flare of vivid lightnings, forks of blue flame springing up from the tower and from the encircling hills into the sudden, sullen clouds. The earth groaned, and out of the city there came a cry. Mingled with harsh high voices as of birds of prey and the shrill neighing of horses wild with rage and fear, there came a rending screech, shivering, rising swiftly to a piercing pitch beyond the range of hearing. The hobbits wheeled round towards it and cast themselves down, holding their hands upon their ears. As the terrible cry ended, falling back through a long, sickening wail to silence, Frodo slowly raised his head. Across the narrow valley, now almost on a level with his eyes, the walls of the evil city stood, and its cavernous gate, shaped like an open mouth with gleaming teeth, was gaping wide, and out of the gate an army came. All that host was clad in sable, dark as the night. Against the wan walls and the luminous pavement of the road, Frodo could see them, small black figures in rank upon rank, marching swiftly and silently, passing outwards in an endless stream. Before them went a great cavalry of horsemen moving like ordered shadows, and at their head was one greater than all the rest. A rider, all black, save that on his hooded head he had a helm like a crown that flickered with a perilous light. Now he was drawing near the bridge below, and Frodo's staring eyes followed him, unable to wink or to withdraw. Surely there was the Lord of the Nine Riders returned to earth to lead his ghastly host to battle. Here, yes, here indeed was the haggard king, whose cold hand had smitten down the ring-bearer with his deadly knife. The old wound throbbed with pain, and a great chill spread towards Frodo's heart. Even as these thoughts pierced him with dread and held him bound as with a spell, the rider halted suddenly, right before the entrance of the bridge, and behind him all the host stood still. There was a pause, a dead silence. Maybe it was the ring that called to the Wraith Lord, and for a moment he was troubled, sensing some other power within his valley. This way and that turned the dark head, helmed and crowned with fear, sweeping the shadows with its unseen eyes. Frodo waited like a bird at the approach of a snake, unable to move. And as he waited, he felt more urgent than ever before the command that he should put on the ring. But great as the pressure was, he felt no inclination now to yield to it. He knew that the ring would only betray him, and that he had not, even if he put it on, the power to face the Morgul king. Not yet. There was no longer any answer to that command in his own will, dismayed by terror though it was, and he felt only the beating upon him of a great power from outside. It took his hand, and as Frodo watched with his mind, not willing it, but in suspense, as if he looked on some old story far away, it moved the hand inch by inch towards the chain upon his neck. Then his own will stirred. Slowly it forced the hand back and set it to find another thing, a thing lying hidden near his breast. Cold and hard it seemed as his grip closed on it, the phial of Galadriel, so long treasured and almost forgotten till that hour. As he touched it, for a while all thought of the ring was banished from his mind. He sighed and bent his head. At that moment the Wraith King turned and spurred his horse and rode across the bridge, and all his dark host followed him. Maybe the elven hoods defied his unseen eyes, and the mind of his small enemy, being strengthened, had turned aside his thought. But he was in haste. Already the hour had struck, and at his great master's bidding he must march with war into the west. Soon he had passed, like a shadow into shadow, down the winding road, and behind him still the black ranks crossed the bridge. So great an army had never issued from that vale since the days of Isildur's might. No host so fell and strong in arms had yet assailed the fords of Anduin, and yet it was but one, and not the greatest of hosts, that Mordor now sent forth. Frodo stirred, and suddenly his heart went out to Faramir. The storm has burst at last, he thought. This great array of spears and swords is going to Osgiliath. Will Faramir get across in time? He guessed it, but did he know the hour? And who can now hold the fords when the King of the Nine Riders comes? And other armies will come. I am too late. All is lost. I tarried on the way. All is lost. Even if my errand is performed, no one will ever know. There will be no one I can tell. It will be in vain. Overcome with weakness, he wept. And still the host of Morgul crossed the bridge. Then at a great distance, as if it came out of memories of the Shire, some sunlit early morning, when the day called and the doors were opening, he heard Sam's voice speaking. "Wake up, Mr. Frodo, wake up." Had the voice added, "Your breakfast is ready," he would hardly have been surprised. Certainly Sam was urgent. "Wake up, Mr. Frodo. They're gone," he said. There was a dull clang. The gates of Minas Morgul had closed. The last rank of spears had vanished down the road. The tower still grinned across the valley, but the light was fading in it. The whole city was falling back into a dark, brooding shade and silence, yet still it was filled with watchfulness. Wake up, Mr. Frodo. They're gone, and we'd better go too. There's something still alive in that place. Something with eyes or a seeing mind. You take me, and the longer we stay in one spot, the sooner it will get on to us. Come on, Mr. Frodo. Frodo raised his head and then stood up. Despair had not left him, but the weakness had passed. He even smiled grimly, feeling now as clearly as a moment before he had felt the opposite, that what he had to do if he could, and that whether Faramir or Aragorn or Elrond or Galadriel or Gandalf or anyone else ever knew about it was beside the purpose. He took his staff in one hand and the phial in the other. When he saw that the clear light was already welling through his fingers, he thrust it into his bosom and held it against his heart. Then turning from the city of Morgul, now no more than a gray glimmer across a dark gulf, he prepared to take the upward road. Gollum, it seemed, had crawled off along the ledge into the darkness beyond when the gates of Minas Morgul opened, leaving the hobbits where they lay. He now came creeping back, his teeth chattering and his fingers snapping. "Foolish, silly," he hissed. "Make haste. They mustn't think danger has passed. It hasn't. Make haste." They did not answer, but they followed him on to the climbing ledge. It was little to the liking of either of them, not even after facing so many other perils, but it did not last long. Soon the path reached a rounded angle where the mountain side swelled out again, and there it suddenly entered a narrow opening in the rock. They had come to the first stair that Gollum had spoken of. The darkness was almost complete, and they could see nothing much beyond the hands stretched, but Gollum's eyes shone pale several feet above as he turned back towards them. "Careful," he whispered. "Steps. Lots of steps. Must be careful." Care was certainly needed. Frodo and Sam at first felt easier, having now a wall on either side, but the stairway was almost as steep as a ladder, and as they climbed up and up, they became more and more aware of the long black fall behind them. And the steps were narrow, spaced unevenly, and often treacherous. They were worn and smooth at the edges, and some were broken, and some cracked as foot was set upon them. The hobbits struggled on until at last they were clinging with desperate fingers to the steps ahead, and forcing their aching knees to bend and straighten. And ever as the stair cut its way deeper into the sheer mountain, the rocky walls rose higher and higher above their heads. At length, just as they felt they could endure no more, they saw Gollum's eyes peering down at them again. "We're up," he whispered. "First stair's past. Clever hobbits to climb so high, very clever hobbits. Just a few more steps, and that's all, yes." Dizzy and very tired, Sam and Frodo, following him, crawled up the last step and sat down, rubbing their legs and knees. They were in a deep, dark passage that seemed still to go up before them, though at a gentler slope and without steps. Gollum did not let them rest long. "There's another stair still," he said. "Much longer stair. Rest when we get to the top of next stair. Not yet." Sam groaned. "Longer, did you say?" he asked. Yes, longer," said Gollum, "but not so difficult. Hobbits have climbed the straight stair. Next comes the winding stair." "And what after that?" said Sam. "We shall see," said Gollum softly. "Oh yes, we shall see." "I thought you said there was a tunnel," said Sam. "Isn't there a tunnel or something to go through?" "Oh yes, there's a tunnel," said Gollum, "but hobbits can rest before they try that. If they get through that, they'll be nearly at the top. Very nearly if they get through that, oh yes." Frodo shivered. The climb had made him sweat, but now he felt cold and clammy, and there was a chill draught in the dark passage, blowing down from the invisible heights above. He got up and shook himself. "Well, let's go on," he said. "There is no place to sit in." The passage seemed to go on for miles, and always the chill air flowed over them, rising as they went on to a bitter wind. The mountains seemed to be trying with their deadly breath to daunt them, to turn them back from the secrets of the high places, or to blow them away into the darkness behind. They only knew that they had come to the end when suddenly they felt no wall at their right hand. They could see very little. Great black shapeless masses and deep gray shadows loomed above them and about them, but now and again a dull red light flickered up under the lowering clouds, and for a moment they were aware of tall peaks in front and on either side, like pillars holding up a vast, sagging roof. They seemed to have climbed up many hundreds of feet onto a wide shelf. A cliff was on their left and a chasm on their right. Golem led the way close under the cliff. For the present they were no longer climbing, but the ground was now more broken and dangerous in the dark, and there were blocks and lumps of fallen stone in the way. Their going was slow and cautious. How many hours had passed since they had entered the Morgul Vale, neither Sam nor Frodo could any longer guess. The night seemed endless. At length they were once more aware of a wall looming up, and once more a stairway opened before them. Again they halted, and again they began to climb. It was a long and weary ascent, but this stairway did not delve into the mountainside. Here the huge cliff face sloped backwards, and the path like a snake wound to and fro across it. At one point it crawled sideways right to the edge of a dark chasm, and Frodo, glancing down, saw below him as a vast deep pit the great ravine at the head of the Morgul Valley. Down in its depth glimmered like a glowworm red the wraith road from the dead city to the nameless pass. He turned hastily away. Still on and up the stairway bent and crawled, until at last, with a final flight, short and straight, it climbed out again on to another level. The path had veered away from the main pass in the great ravine, and it now followed its own perilous course at the bottom of a lesser cleft among the higher regions of the Dwarf. Dimly the hobbits could discern tall piers and jagged pinnacles of stone on either side, between which were great crevices and fissures, blacker than the night, where forgotten winters had gnawed and carved the sunless stone. And now the red light in the sky seemed stronger, though they could not tell whether a dreadful morning was indeed coming to this place of shadow, or whether they saw only the flame of some great violence of Sauron in the torment of Gorgoroth beyond. Still far ahead, and still high above, Frodo, looking up, saw, as he guessed, the very crown of this bitter road. Against the sullen redness of the eastern sky, a cleft was outlined in the topmost ridge, narrow, deep cloven between two black shoulders, and on either shoulder was a horn of stone. He paused and looked more attentively. The horn upon the left was tall and slender, and in it burned a red light, or else the red light in the land beyond was shining through a hole. He saw now it was a black tower poised above the outer pass. He touched Sam's arm and pointed. "I don't like the look of that," said Sam. "So this secret way of yours is guarded after all," he growled, turning to Gollum. "As you knew all along, I suppose?" "All ways are watched, yes," said Gollum. "Of course they are, but hobbits must try some way. This way be least watched. Perhaps they've all gone away to big battle, perhaps." "Perhaps," grunted Sam. "Well, it seems still a long ways off and a long way up before we get there. And there's still the tunnel. I think you ought to rest now, Mr. Frodo. I don't know what time of day or night it is, but we've kept going for hours and hours." "Yes, we must rest," said Frodo. "Let us find some corner out of the wind and gather our strength for the last lap." For so he felt it to be. The terrors of the land beyond and the deed to be done there seemed remote, too far off yet to trouble him. All his mind was bent on getting through or over this impenetrable wall and guard. If once he could do that impossible thing, then somehow the errand would be accomplished, or so it seemed to him in that dark hour of weariness, still laboring in the stony shadows under Surith Ungol. In a dark crevice between two great piers of rock they sat down, Frodo and Sam a little way within, and Gollum crouched upon the ground near the opening. There the hobbits took what they expected would be their last meal before they went down into the nameless land. Maybe the last meal they would ever eat together. Some of the food of Gondor they ate, and wafers of the waybread of the elves, and they drank a little. But of their water they were sparing and took only enough to moisten their dry mouths. "I wonder when we'll find water again," said Sam. "But I suppose even over there they drink? Orcs drink, don't they?" "Yes, they drink," said Frodo. "But do not let us speak of that. Such drink is not for us." "Then all the more need to fill our bottles," said Sam. "But there isn't any water up here. Not a sound or a trinkle have I heard. And anyway, Faramir said we were not to drink any water in Morgul." "No water flowing out of inland Morgul," were his words, said Frodo. "We are not in that valley now, and if we came on a spring, it would be flowing into it and not out of it." "I wouldn't trust it," said Sam. "Not till I was dying of thirst. There's a wicked feeling about this place." He sniffed. "And a smell, I fancy. Do you notice it? A queer kind of smell. Stuffy. I don't like it." "I don't like anything here at all," said Frodo. "Step or stone, breath or bone. Earth, air, and water all seem accursed, but so our path is laid." "Yes, that's so," said Sam. "And we shouldn't be here at all if we'd known more about it before we started. But I suppose it's often that way. The brave things in the old tales and songs, Mr. Frodo. Adventures, as I used to call them. I used to think that they were things the wonderful folk of the stories went out and looked for, because they wanted them, because they were exciting and life was a bit dull, a kind of a sport, as you might say. But that's not the way of it with the tales that really mattered, or the ones that stay in the mind. Folk seem to have just landed in